Israeli airstrikes on Gaza and Lebanon have intensified, killing over 34 civilians in Gaza and targeting Beirut suburbs. Over 15 Lebanese towns face evacuation orders amid rising regional instability. Join us in our special coverage on Qnews, where minute-by-minute updates are on your way, where we track how the ongoing war has amplified concerns over regional stability, with heavy civilian casualties and heightened fears of broader instability. Eight civilians have been killed and several others wounded in Israeli shelling across the Gaza Strip. Medical sources confirmed 4 deaths and injuries in Qizana Najjar village near Khan Yunis. 2 civilians were killed in airstrikes near Gaza City's industrial zone, and 2 more were killed in Tal al-Hawa neighborhood. Additionally, Israeli drone shelling east of the Palestinian side of Rafah injured multiple civilians. At least 8 Palestinians have been killed and several others injured in an Israeli airstrike that targeted Al-Bureij refugee camp in central Gaza. Palestinian media reported that the Israeli occupation forces launched a series of strikes on the residential buildings in Al-Nusayrat and Al-Bureij camps. The occupation forces also targeted the northwestern areas of Gaza City, causing widespread damage overnight. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed or wounded in a deadly Israeli airstrike on Beit Lahia. The strike targeted a 5-story building housing displaced families early this morning, causing significant casualties and extensive damage. Gaza Civil Defense reports that at least 30 people were killed and 59 others are still missing. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to escalate as relentless Israeli airstrikes devastate densely populated areas, leaving over 2.3 million Palestinians struggling with severe shortages of food, water, and medical supplies.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has reached critical levels as Israeli airstrikes persist in targeting densely populated areas, further deteriorating living conditions for over 2.3 million Palestinians. Severe shortages in food, water, and medical supplies have left the population in a desperate state. Reports indicate that United Nations facilities, including schools and shelters, have suffered repeated strikes, resulting in significant civilian casualties and extensive damage to essential humanitarian infrastructure. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, has described the crisis as unprecedented in its scale, warning that many of its facilities are no longer safe amid the ongoing bombardment. This has compounded the already dire challenges faced by displaced civilians seeking refuge. In the West Bank, tensions continue to escalate as Israeli forces intensify military operations. Clashes in multiple locations have led to significant Palestinian casualties. Refugee camps have been targeted by military raids, resulting in home demolitions, detentions, and severe restrictions on access to basic services. Concurrently, Israeli settler violence against Palestinian communities has surged, with reports of attacks in various areas exacerbating the volatile situation. The international community has expressed grave concern over the targeting of U.S. facilities in Gaza and the broader humanitarian crisis. Calls for accountability and the protection of civilians have intensified Yet the violence shows no signs of abating. These developments underscore the urgent need for an immediate ceasefire and increased humanitarian aid to alleviate the suffering of millions in Gaza and the West Bank. The situation demands swift international action to prevent further deterioration and address the region's escalating humanitarian and political challenges.
To help us analyze the current situation in Gaza, we're joined from Ramallah by Palestine Institute for National Security Director, Major General Habis Al-Sharoof. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Firstly, let's start off by asking, what is the reason for the recent Israeli escalation in several areas in the Gaza Strip?
Greetings, everybody. In fact, there are no reasons for these Israeli escalations. You know, it is just the systematic offensives that Israeli occupation forces have been practicing ever since this war started out. And we have seen over the last 2 days the amount of pounding and aerial strikes in Beit Lahia and other regions. And it is actually the Israeli policies to displace the Palestinians from the northern side of Gaza to the southern side. Israel just wants to impose full control over the Gaza Strip. The other thing is that the Israelis want to pressurize Hamas to release Israeli hostages. And the third reason maybe is that they think there are militant individuals residing in these areas that are relating to Hamas and the Islamic Jihad group. But we see what the Israelis are doing. They are just targeting civilian institutions, schools, educational institutions, hospitals. And so it is very evident what the goal of the Israelis is. It is just to displace the Palestinians, and that's it.
Okay, sir, is it possible for the UN Security Council to reach a new decision regarding the Gaza Strip with the departure of Biden's administration from the White House approaching?
I think that the United Nations and the Security Council are protecting Israel. Let me even be more outrageous and say that the United Nations is a partner in crime to Israel because they keep on subsidizing Israel diplomatically with arms, with finances, and so the United Nations is just trying to sell us some kind of an illusion that they want peace to prevail. But if they were really serious about these claims of theirs, they would have cut all kinds of arms and arms subsidy to Israel, but this never happened. And why didn't Israel abide by the Article number 7 of the Security Council resolution? You know, we keep seeing how Netanyahu just rejects all kind of international and regional mediation to bring a ceasefire. You know, the Palestinians are just starving. They don't have food. They don't have water and no medical care as well. And so there is a humanitarian crisis in the fullest sense of the word that is taking place there. And, you know, the international media is ignoring these massacres taking place in Gaza. There are still a lot of pounding from marine military pieces of Israel, and a lot of pounding, a lot of airstrikes as well are taking place. And Israel just considers itself above the law because it didn't receive any kind of deterrence from the international community. And in fact, right now we can see the world is going or is gravitating towards Palestine and is calling for the stopping of an aggression.
Sir, you touched on the idea of, Israel operating with impunity and in addition to the humanitarian situation as well in the Gaza Strip. But if you could possibly talk to us a bit about the situation in the north of Gaza. What's it like right now? Have they been able to find access to food, water and medication?
In fact, the situation in Gaza is catastrophic in the fullest sense of the word. What is happening over there is complete and utter genocide.
Okay, and the north specifically, because they were under siege. Okay, it seems that we have a technical issue right there. That was Major General Habis al-Sharif, the director of the Palestinian Institute for National Security. Thank you for joining us. We move on to the Palestinian Health Ministry that has condemned last night's Israeli military raid on its health clinic in the village of Kobar, northwest of the Gaza Strip. And they have stormed in Ramallah, According to the ministry, a large Israeli military force forcibly broke down the clinic's door and stormed the building late last night. In a statement, the ministry described the assault as a blatant violation of international law and called on the international community to take immediate action to protect Palestinian health workers and medical infrastructure. Israeli occupation forces have detained at least 15 Palestinians from various parts of the West Bank, including a child, during a series of overnight raids. The recent detentions bring the total number of Palestinians detained since the beginning of the ongoing Israeli aggression to over 11,700, including those arrested from both the West Bank and Jerusalem. Gazan health authorities have confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7th has surged to over 43,800, with over 103,740 individuals injured. They added that Israeli occupation forces committed 6 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, killing at least 47 Palestinians and injuring 139 others. The ongoing conflict in Gaza has led to a devastating humanitarian crisis, displacing over 1.9 million people. With the limited resources and escalating violence, international support is urgently needed to alleviate the suffering.
The ongoing conflict in Gaza has triggered a humanitarian crisis, with thousands of residents left stranded and displaced. As violence intensifies, many families are fleeing their homes, seeking safety in increasingly overcrowded areas. The United Nations has warned that over 1.9 million people in Gaza have been forced from their homes since the start of the conflict, with no clear destination for many of them. Humanitarian agencies are struggling to provide adequate aid due to severe restrictions on the ground, making it difficult to access those in need. Gaza's infrastructure is crumbling under the pressure of continued airstrikes and blockades, and with hospitals overwhelmed, access to basic services is becoming scarce. The UN, Human Rights Watch, and other organizations are calling for urgent international support, but the situation remains dire. With limited places to shelter and no guarantee of safety, many people are trapped in a cycle of displacement, facing the daily threat of violence and the growing shortage of food, water, and medical care. The long-term implications for Gaza's population are devastating, and the international community continues to demand immediate action to alleviate the suffering of those caught in the conflict.
مستهدفين هن مدنيين. الوضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Israeli occupation forces have launched 4 waves of airstrikes on Beirut's southern suburbs since the early morning. Lebanese media stated that Israeli warplanes launched at least 4 violent airstrikes on Harat Harik, with most of the strikes reported as powerful. An Israeli airstrike has targeted a building in Beirut's Ras al-Naba neighborhood, killing 1 and injuring 3, marking the first such attack in nearly a month. The strike hit a busy area without warning, identified as a bath party center. Additionally, the Lebanese army confirmed a 2nd soldier's death from the Israeli attack on a military center in Al-Mari Hasbiya following earlier casualties. The Israeli occupation forces have ordered the evacuation of residents over 15 towns and villages in southern Lebanon. The latest orders targeted areas including Hadath, Harat Harik and Burj al-Baranjiyah, and the occupation army's spokesperson in a statement in Arabic warned residents of leaving immediately, citing preparations for airstrikes. The United States has introduced a draft proposal aimed at de-escalating the conflict in Lebanon, focusing on a ceasefire, Hezbollah's disarmament and delivery of humanitarian aid. For further analysis on the current escalating tensions in Lebanon, we're joined from Beirut by the military expert, Brigadier General Adel Al-Mashmoushi. Welcome, sir, to Qnews. Thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, let's start off by asking, how do you assess the current situation in Lebanon? Do you believe, especially when it comes to the southern suburbs, do you think that this is an escalation from the Israeli part?
Greetings, everyone. In fact, over the last 3 days, the Lebanese front has been witnessing a lot of dramatic changes because of the exacerbation and acceleration of the offensives of Israel alongside the borders between Lebanon and Palestine, and as well in the southern suburbs of Beirut. And in fact, the spokesperson of Hezbollah was targeted as well in the middle of Beirut. All these things attest to the fact that Israel is utilizing this transitional phase before Donald Trump finally officially comes to presidential office. And they're doing that to further escalate the situation and the strikes. And as well, the Israeli deployment is increasing, specifically in the Al Khiyam city, which has a high symbolic significance in the region. And we know that back in 2006, the Israelis tried to carry out an incursion into this city, but they failed over and over again. And right now, they're seizing the opportunity to advance into this city. But there hasn't been a lot of resistance in this regard.
So, sir, what do you think of the Israeli tactic of targeting civilian areas, including hospitals? What message do you think they're trying to send to the Lebanese people? Are they trying to do what they were doing in Gaza, or is it a different kind of messaging?
In fact, we can liken what's happening in Lebanon to what the Israelis have done previously in Gaza. These offensives target economic institutions and civilian districts, and they as well target hospitals and healthcare institutions. And this, in fact, indicates the fact that the Israelis are just, continuously breaching all the international instruments that regulate the practices of war and the norms of war even. As well, the Israelis target media channels and media institutions. They just target everything, all civilian institutions, and not just military centers or brigades. And in fact, this is indicative of how the Israelis just doesn't care. The Israelis don't care at all about all these international war instruments.
So, sir, what strategic importance do these locations targeted by Israel hold, especially in areas like the southern suburbs and St. George Hospital?
The strategic significance, I believe, the Israelis just target any big establishment or any establishment or building that had been established recently, just to cause the biggest amount of loss and damage possible. They as well target economic institutions in Lebanon and all the ambience that is incubating Hezbollah.
So, sir, the recent bombings that we've seen in certain areas is the first of its kind. What implications does this have for future military operations and the security situation as a whole?
I think from a strategic perspective, they are insignificant, and from a strategic military perspective, we can say frankly that the chiefs of Hezbollah, military chiefs of Hezbollah, have all been targeted, but Hezbollah was able to absorb these strikes and was able to fight back and resist. And we can see how Hezbollah has been launching a lot of missiles alongside the borders. And as well, they have been targeting a lot of generic targets in Israel, inside Tel Aviv itself. And this attests to the fact that that Hezbollah has a lot of capacities to target certain venues in Israel. But
yes.
of course, there is a discrepancy between the Israelis
Sir,
and the resistance.
I'm sorry, but we're out of time for this segment. But thank you so much for joining us. That was the military expert, Brigadier General Adil Mashmouchi. Thank you so much for your insights, and thank you for joining us here on Qnews. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our special coverage on the Middle East. Remember to stay updated by following Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG. Why for the latest developments.